The icy winds howled like banshees over the tundra of Kairos 9, a planet as unforgiving as it was breathtaking. Its surface was a mosaic of jagged glaciers, endless snowfields, and crystalline ice formations that shimmered under the light of its twin suns. It was a place where temperatures could plummet to lethal levels in seconds and where even the hardiest of species struggled to survive. Yet, despite the stark beauty of the world, the lecture hall within the domed research station bustled with life. Professor Alok 10 of the Xianth Collective, an 8-limbed alien species known for their towering intellect, stood at the center of the room. His translucent, blue-green skin shimmered faintly under the artificial lighting, and his 4 eyes, each capable of independent motion, scanned the diverse crowd before him. Today's topic: why human adaptability is grossly overestimated. The professor's voice clicked and hummed in his species' natural cadence, translated instantly into a myriad of languages by the station's universal interpreter system. Kairos 9 is not merely a planet. It is a crucible, a test of resilience that no species save the Krillians has passed. And yet, he paused, his eyes locking onto a cluster of humans at the back of the hall. Humans insist on their capacity to adapt to anything. It is a biological arrogance I find amusing. The humans, a mix of scientists and military personnel, exchanged glances. Among them was Captain Maria Delgado, a survival specialist renowned for her unshakable confidence and quick wit. She leaned back in her chair, a smirk playing on her lips as the professor continued his tirade. "You are a fragile species," Alok 10 declared, pacing. "Your bodies are poorly insulated, your circulatory systems inefficient for extreme environments, and your reliance on tools, primitive. You survive not because of innate superiority but through sheer luck and an over-reliance on technology." The room murmured with mixed reactions, some in agreement, others offended. Delgado, however, raised her hand. "Yes, Captain?" Alok 10 acknowledged, a hint of condescension in his tone. "Professor," Delgado began, her voice steady, "with all due respect, adaptability isn't just about biology. It's about creativity, ingenuity, and, dare I say it, grit. Give us the same resources as any Krillian, and we'll not only survive, we'll thrive." The room went silent. Alok 10 tilted his head, his bioluminescent tendrils flickering in what could only be described as amusement. "A bold claim, Captain. But words mean little here on Kairos 9. Actions, however, speak volumes." Delgado leaned forward, her smirk widening. "Then let's make it interesting. Set the parameters and we'll show you what humans can do." Alok 10 paused, considering her challenge. Finally he said, "Very well. Tomorrow at dawn I shall take your team to the Expanse, where temperatures drop to minus 120 degrees Celsius. You will have no advanced technology, only your wits. If you can construct a shelter capable of sustaining life within 10 of your Earth minutes, I will concede your adaptability is not entirely overstated." The audience erupted in murmurs again. Building a shelter on Kairos IX's expanse was a death sentence for most species. Delgado's smirk faded slightly, but her confidence didn't waver. "Challenge accepted," she said. Alok 10's tendrils glowed brighter, an unmistakable sign of delight. "Then let us see if human arrogance is matched by human capability." As the hall emptied, Delgado's team gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of awe and concern. "Maria, are you insane?" asked Dr. Ethan Park, a cryobiologist who had spent years studying Kairos IX's hostile climate. "The expanse is lethal. Even Krillians only survive there because of their bioadaptive carapaces." "We're not Krillians," Delgado replied, her voice calm but firm. "We're human. And that's exactly why we'll win this. Do you even have a plan?" Lieutenant Aisha Kaur, the team's engineer, asked. Delgado grinned. "I've got the beginning of one. Meet me in the hangar in an hour. We've got some prep to do." True to her word, Delgado spent the night preparing. She studied Krillian survival techniques, reread human survival manuals, and scoured the station's supply depot for anything that might give her team an edge. When dawn broke over Kairos IX's frozen horizon, she was ready. The team assembled at the hangar, clad in thermal suits but otherwise stripped of advanced tools. Alok 10 was waiting for them, flanked by a group of Xianth observers. His expression was unreadable, but Delgado could sense his skepticism. "The transport is ready," he said, gesturing to a hovercraft. "I trust you are as well." Delgado nodded, her team filing in behind her. As the transport lifted off, the weight of the challenge ahead settled over them. They were about to face one of the most hostile environments in the known galaxy, armed with little more than their resolve. The expanse was even more unforgiving than Delgado had imagined. The ground was a patchwork of ice and jagged rock, and the wind was a relentless force that seemed to cut through their suits like knives. The transport landed in a sheltered valley, the closest thing to a mild area in the region. "You have 10 minutes, Alok 10 said, his tendrils glowing faintly with anticipation. "Your time begins, now." Delgado wasted no time. Ethan analyzed the snow density. "Aisha, start carving out blocks. We're building an igloo." "An igloo?" Aisha asked, incredulous. "Trust me," Delgado said. As the clock ticked down, the team worked furiously. Ethan identified the optimal snow for construction, while Aisha used a collapsible survival knife to carve precise blocks. Delgado oversaw the process, her mind racing to ensure every detail was perfect. The seconds slipped away, the howling wind threatening to derail their efforts. But Delgado's voice kept her team focused. "Keep moving. We've got this." With just 30 seconds to spare, the final block was set in place. The team scrambled inside as the wind intensified. Alok 10 approached the structure, his eyes narrowing as he scanned it. Delgado emerged from the igloo, her breath visible in the frigid air. "It's not perfect," she admitted, "but it's functional. Check for yourself." Alok 10 hesitated, then entered the igloo. The temperature inside was noticeably warmer, the compacted snow providing insulation. For the first time, the professor's tendrils dimmed, a sign of genuine surprise. "You have succeeded," he said, his voice softer. Delgado smiled. "Told you. Humans adapt." As the transport carried them back to the station, Alok 10 remained silent, his mind racing. The humans had proven something he couldn't deny. Their adaptability was not arrogance, it was evolution. And for the first time, the Xyanth professor wondered if perhaps he had underestimated the species that had come to dominate the stars. The transport hovered low over the icy terrain, its thrusters carving temporary furrows into the snow before quickly filling again with the endless barrage of wind-driven powder. Inside, the atmosphere was a mix of determination and quiet tension. Captain Maria Delgado glanced around at her team. Ethan, the cryobiologist who had spent years cataloging frozen environments. Aisha, the engineer with hands as steady as her nerves were frayed, and Corporal Ryan Vickers, their team's muscle, whose quiet demeanor often masked his sharp instincts. Professor Alok 10 sat across from them, his translucent tendrils flickering in what Maria could only interpret as smug anticipation. His species' physiology was fascinating, evolved to adapt to multiple climates without external tools. The Xyanth thrived where other species faltered. And now he seemed all too eager to witness the humans stumble. 10 Earth minutes, Alok 10 repeated, his 4 independent eyes swiveling toward Maria. "An igloo is what you propose. Do you truly believe you can master the art of Krillian survival engineering so quickly?" It took the Krillian species centuries to perfect. Maria met his gaze, unwavering. "We don't need centuries. Just creativity and teamwork." The Xyanth professor made a soft clicking sound, something akin to laughter. "Your confidence is admirable if misplaced." The transport slowed, its lights illuminating a vast, desolate plain. The expanse stretched endlessly before them, a frozen wasteland punctuated by razor-sharp ice formations. The temperature gauges in their thermal suits warned of a plummet to -120°C, a level lethal to nearly all known species without specialized adaptations. "This is the drop zone," Alok 10 announced as the transport settled. The cargo bay doors hissed open, letting in an unforgiving gust of icy wind. It cut through even their advanced thermal suits, a brutal reminder of what lay ahead. Maria's voice rose above the wind. "Team, move out. We've got 10 minutes. No margin for error." They disembarked, their boots crunching against the frost-encrusted ground. Alok 10 remained on the transport, his tendrils glowing faintly as he observed. The countdown began. The first challenge was finding suitable snow. Maria knew not all snow was the same. Light, powdery snow wouldn't hold shape, and hard-packed ice would be impossible to carve without advanced tools. "Ethan, I need density analysis now." Ethan crouched, pulling out a small, collapsible probe from his survival kit. It was primitive by comparison to the advanced Krillian biotech Alok 10 had likely expected them to fail with, but it worked. He pressed the probe into the snow, watching as the readings displayed on his wrist-mounted screen. "This spot's useless," Ethan called out. "Too powdery. We need something with more structure." Maria's mind raced. They couldn't afford to waste time hunting aimlessly. Scanning the terrain, she spotted a snowdrift at the base of a jagged ice formation. The wind had likely compacted it over time. "There. Move, she ordered. The team sprinted toward the drift, fighting against the relentless wind. Corporal Vickers carried a collapsible shovel, immediately breaking into the snowbank as soon as they arrived. "Feels solid," he grunted, his breath forming clouds in the icy air. Maria knelt beside him, inspecting the snow he excavated. It was dense, cohesive, the perfect material for building. "Good. Aisha, start cutting blocks. Ethan, assist her. Vickers, clear the area for construction. I'll map the structure." Aisha unfolded her survival knife, its blade gleaming in the dim light. She began carving precise rectangular blocks, her engineer's precision shining through despite the brutal conditions. Ethan helped stack the blocks as they were cut, his gloved hands moving quickly despite the cold. Maria used her wrist console to sketch a basic igloo design. It wasn't going to win any architectural awards, but it would hold. The key was the keystone block, the final piece that locked the structure together. Without it, the igloo would collapse under its own weight. 6 minutes left. Maria called out. The wind howled louder, as if the planet itself were mocking them. Aisha and Ethan worked faster, their movements almost mechanical. Vickers continued clearing snow, creating a stable foundation. Maria supervised, her sharp eyes scanning for any flaws in their process. The wind was picking up and time was slipping away. "Captain, we're running out of blocks," Aisha said, her voice strained. Maria glanced at the pile they'd managed to carve. It wasn't enough. They needed at least 4 more blocks to complete the dome. Vickers, help Aisha carve. Ethan, keep stacking. I'll fill in. Without hesitation, Maria grabbed a spare knife and began carving alongside Aisha. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but the cold was brutal. Every motion felt slower, her muscles protesting against the freezing conditions. But she pushed through. There was no room for hesitation, no room for failure. 3 minutes. Alokten's voice crackled over the comms. Maria could hear the amusement in his tone. "Almost there," she shouted back, more for her team's benefit than his. The igloo was taking shape now, its curved walls providing a hint of shelter from the wind. With 1 minute remaining, the final block, the keystone, was ready. It was up to Maria to place it. She climbed onto the partially constructed igloo, her movements careful but quick. The wind threatened to knock her off balance, but she steadied herself. "Block," she called. Ethan handed it up to her, his face etched with worry. Maria positioned the keystone at the top of the structure. It had to fit perfectly or the entire igloo would collapse. She adjusted it once, twice, then pressed it into place. The walls groaned slightly but held. "Get inside," she ordered. The team scrambled into the igloo, Maria following close behind. The moment she entered, the howling wind seemed to dull. The temperature inside was still cold, but it was bearable, a stark contrast to the lethal conditions outside. Alokten approached the igloo, his tendrils glowing faintly. He scanned it with a small device, his expression unreadable. After a moment he spoke. "Your structure is functional," he admitted. "But barely. It will not last long." "It only needed to last 10 minutes, Maria replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "And it did." Alokten's tendrils flickered again, this time in a pattern Maria recognized as begrudging respect. "Indeed, Captain. It appears I underestimated your species. Perhaps there is more to human adaptability than arrogance." Maria allowed herself a small smile. The battle was far from over, but for now humanity had proven itself. Inside the igloo, the team huddled together, the limited insulation of the snow trapping just enough body heat to keep them alive. Their breaths came out in rhythmic puffs, condensing in the frigid air. The faint hum of their comm devices was the only sound, apart from the muffled howling of the wind outside. Corporal Vickers rubbed his gloved hands together, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "Well, Captain, we built the igloo. What now? This doesn't exactly scream a long-term survival." Maria looked at the thin layer of frost forming on the inner walls. The objective was 10 minutes. We've bought ourselves time to think. For now, let's ensure we're stable and not about to collapse under a gust of wind. Stable? Aisha, still catching her breath, gestured at the narrow confines. "This is a glorified snow cave. If the temperature drops any further, we're popsicles, thermal suits or not." Ethan tapped on his wrist console, frowning at the readings. "We've got a few degrees buffer inside here, but it won't last long. The snow's insulating, but we need a heat source. Even our suits will fail eventually." Maria's gaze flicked to her team and then to the faint light streaming through the small hole they'd left at the top for ventilation. It wasn't enough. Not nearly. And though she wouldn't admit it aloud, Alok 10's skepticism about their survival gnawed at the edges of her confidence. Outside, Alok 10 observed the igloo from a safe distance, his tendrils glowing with what could only be described as curiosity. Despite their rudimentary tools and primitive methods, the humans had accomplished what many in the Galactic Confederation believed impossible. Yet he couldn't help but feel that their feat was temporary, a desperate last stand against an unforgiving planet. They've managed to build a shell, he murmured to himself. But how long can they endure? Adaptation without permanence is fleeting. He tapped into his communicator, broadcasting his observations to the Galactic Confederation's Central Archive. Subject: Human Survival on Cryos 7. Initial assessment: their ingenuity is remarkable but insufficient for long-term habitation. Hypothesis: humanity will fall short of Kryllian resilience standards. Observing further. Inside the igloo, Maria's mind worked quickly. They had the structure, but survival required more than shelter. It demanded resourcefulness, ingenuity, and above all, grit. "All right," she said, her voice cutting through the cold silence. "Let's focus on priorities. Aisha, what's our best shot at a heat source?" The engineer tilted her head, considering. "We don't have fuel, and an open flame would melt the igloo anyway. Our suit batteries could be rigged to generate localized heat, but that's risky. We might drain them before we can recharge." Maria nodded. "We'll save that as a last resort. Ethan, what's the terrain look like beyond this area? Anything we can use?" Ethan hesitated, checking the limited scans he'd managed to capture on the descent. "Not much, Captain. Mostly flat ice plains with occasional jagged formations. There might be thermal vents deeper in the expanse, but they're too far to reach without transport." Maria clenched her jaw. The situation was dire, but giving up wasn't an option. "We'll stay put for now and conserve energy. Aisha, see if you can rig something low power for heat. Vickers, keep watch at the entrance. Ethan, help me map out potential fallback points if this shelter fails." The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Outside, the storm intensified, its howls growing more ferocious. Inside, the team worked in relative silence, the urgency of their tasks keeping them focused. Aisha managed to fashion a makeshift heat emitter using spare components from their survival kits. It wasn't much, just a small glowing patch of warmth, but it was enough to stave off the worst of the cold. "Not exactly cozy," she admitted, "but it'll keep us alive a little longer." Maria placed a hand on her shoulder. "Good work, Aisha. Every little bit counts." Meanwhile, Ethan and Maria pored over their rudimentary terrain data. Ethan pointed to a section of the map that showed slightly elevated ground. "If we can reach this ridge, we might have better visibility, and possibly access to denser snow for reinforcement. But it's a risk. The ridge is exposed and we'd be fighting against the storm." Maria weighed the options. Staying in the igloo was safe for now, but it was a temporary fix. Moving to higher ground could offer strategic advantages, but it also meant exposing themselves to Cryo 7's merciless elements. Before she could decide, their comms crackled to life. "Captain Delgado," came Alok 10's voice, laced with amusement. "I must commend your persistence. Your species continues to surprise me. However, I wonder, how long do you plan to remain in that fragile construct before reality sets in?" Maria glanced at her team, their weary faces illuminated by the faint glow of Aisha's heat emitter. She activated her comm, her voice firm. "Long enough to prove you wrong, Professor. Humanity doesn't fold under pressure. We adapt. We survive." Alok 10's response was almost gleeful. "Fascinating. Very well, Captain. I shall continue to observe. For now." As the storm raged on, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that Alok 10 was testing them, not just physically but mentally. He was waiting for them to fail, to confirm his assumptions about humanity's limitations. But Maria had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. Turning to her team, she took a deep breath. "We've survived worse. Stick together, stay focused, and we'll get through this. One step at a time." Her words weren't just for them, they were for herself. Because on this frozen alien world, the line between survival and failure was razor thin, and humanity's resilience was the only thing keeping them from falling. In the distance, the storm began to shift, its ferocity giving way to an eerie calm. Alok 10 watched from his vantage point, his tendrils flickering with intrigue. The humans had lasted longer than he anticipated, but the true test was yet to come. And deep within the icy expanse, something ancient stirred, its presence unnoticed by the struggling team. Cryos 7 was more than a frozen wasteland, it was a place of secrets, waiting to be unearthed. The storm had passed, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. The world outside the igloo was no less harsh, but the clarity of the calm revealed the sheer expanse of Cryo 7's brutal beauty, jagged ice cliffs, endless frozen plains, and faint auroras casting ghostly light across the horizon. Inside, Maria and her team prepared for their next move. Aisha tightened her gear, her breath fogging in the cold air. "Captain, the heat emitter's at its limit. It won't last much longer. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it fast." Maria nodded, her determination unshaken. "We move for the ridge. It's risky, but staying here is a slow death. On higher ground, we'll reassess and find a way to signal for extraction." Ethan, already standing by the igloo's narrow exit, added, "I picked up faint readings of thermal activity just beyond the ridge. Might be a vent. If we can reach it, we could have a sustainable heat source." "Then we go," Maria said firmly. "Suit up, stay sharp, and keep moving. No stopping, no hesitation." As the team filed out, Maria lingered for a moment, glancing back at the igloo. It was a fragile creation, born of desperation but also ingenuity, a testament to what humanity could accomplish even in the most hostile environments. With a deep breath, she followed her team into the frozen expanse. From his observation post, Alok 10 watched the humans' departure with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. His tendrils flickered with a faint violet hue, a sign of contemplation among his kind. "They persist," he murmured, recording his thoughts. "Against all logic they continue. Is it pride? Stubbornness? Or something deeper, an instinct to defy even the inevitable?" As he observed, his instruments picked up faint seismic tremors emanating from the area near the ridge. Frowning, Alok 10 adjusted his equipment, probing deeper into the planet's crust. The readings suggested a dormant geothermal system, one that might awaken under the right conditions. His gaze shifted back to the humans, now small figures trudging through the icy wasteland. "Foolish," he muttered. They walked toward uncertainty, unknowing of what stirs beneath. Maria and her team reached the ridge after what felt like an eternity of battling the elements. The climb was treacherous, the ice slick and unyielding, but they worked together, pulling each other up and anchoring themselves with ropes. When they finally reached the top, the view took their breath away, not from beauty but from sheer scale. Below, a network of jagged ice formations spread out like a labyrinth, and at its center, faint wisps of steam rose into the air. "That's it," Ethan said, pointing. "The thermal vent. If we can get down there." Maria interrupted him, her tone cautious. "We don't know what's down there. But it's our best shot. Let's move." The descent was even more perilous than the climb. The team navigated narrow ledges and unstable ice bridges, every step a calculated risk. As they approached the vent, the air grew warmer, not by much but enough to be noticeable. They reached the edge of the vent, a jagged opening in the ice. Steam hissed upward, carrying with it the faint scent of sulfur. Aisha crouched near the edge, her instruments humming. "Temperature stable," she reported. "It's not much, but it's enough to keep us alive." Maria nodded. "Good. Let's set up a temporary camp here. Will." Before she could finish, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. A deep, resonant roar echoed through the ice, sending cracks spidering out from the vent. "What the hell was that?" Vickers shouted, grabbing his weapon. Ethan checked his scanner, his face pale. "Seismic activity. Something's moving beneath us." Maria's heart raced. "Everyone back up. Move to higher ground." But it was too late. The ice beneath the vent fractured, collapsing inward with a deafening crash. The team scrambled, barely managing to avoid falling into the gaping chasm that had opened before them. From the darkness below, a low, guttural sound emerged, an otherworldly growl that sent chills down their spines. "What is that?" Aisha whispered, her voice trembling. Maria stared into the void, her mind racing. "Whatever it is, we're not sticking around to find out. Move." From his vantage point, Alok 10's instruments lit up with alarms. The seismic activity was far more intense than he'd anticipated, and the thermal vent was now a growing fissure. But what truly unsettled him were the life-form readings, massive, unfamiliar signatures emerging from the depths. "Impossible," he muttered. "Nothing should survive under these conditions." His comms crackled to life as the Galactic Confederation's Central Archive demanded a report. "Professor Alok 10, explain these readings. What have you uncovered?" Alok 10 hesitated. "It appears the humans have awakened something. Cryos 7 is not as barren as we believed." "And the humans?" "They're still alive," he admitted, his tone begrudging. "And adapting as always." Maria and her team retreated to higher ground, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind them, the chasm continued to widen, and from its depths massive, glowing forms began to emerge, towering creatures of ice and light, their movements slow but purposeful. Ethan stared in awe. They were dormant, frozen beneath the surface. The heat from the vent must have awakened them. Maria didn't waste time marveling. We can't fight them and we can't stay here. We need an extraction, now. Aisha worked frantically, boosting their comm signal. Signal's weak, but I'm trying. As the creatures moved closer, their sheer size casting shadows over the team, Maria stepped forward, planting herself firmly between her people and the looming threat. She raised her weapon, not to fire but to show she wasn't afraid. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice carrying across the ice. "We don't mean harm." To her surprise, the creatures paused, their glowing forms shifting as if studying her. For a moment the air was thick with tension. Then a faint hum echoed from above. A Confederation shuttle descended rapidly, its engines roaring as it hovered above the team. A ramp extended and Alok-10's voice crackled through their comms. "Humans board immediately. Your recklessness has endangered this entire sector." Maria didn't hesitate. "Move now." The team scrambled aboard the shuttle, and as it ascended, they watched the creatures recede into the icy abyss, their forms disappearing as quickly as they had emerged. Back aboard the Confederation station, Alok-10 confronted Maria, his tendrils twitching with agitation. "Do you realize what you've done? You've awakened an ancient threat." Maria met his gaze, unflinching. "We survived. Against all odds we adapted and endured. That's what humanity does. You doubted us but we proved you wrong." Alok-10 sighed, his tendrils dimming. "Perhaps there is more to your species than I understood. But your defiance comes at a cost. The creatures you've awakened, their existence will have consequences." Maria nodded. "Every action does. But if there's one thing you can count on, Professor, it's that humanity will face those consequences head-on." As Alok-10 walked away, Maria turned to her team. They were battered, exhausted, but alive, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit. Cryos 7 had tested them, but they had endured. And in doing so, they had once again proven what humanity,